called The World Within, and it was given by Dr. Delbert Blair on February 28th of 1998 at the Metaphysician in Chicago, Illinois. If you would like additional audio or videotapes, please contact the Metacenter. We're located at 1448 East 52nd Street, Chicago, Illinois 60615. Or feel free to call us. Our phone number is area code 773-643-5053.
Sure. The world within. We'll take a look at a deep study of our planet Earth. We'll also take a big jump and begin to look inside our Earth and to see if there's an analysis for many of the things that are happening currently, that have happened in the past, that we can begin to make sense out of some things that normally have been glossed over. Most of us are hearing about spaceships and weather changes and surgical things that are now going on, implants, gene structure, gene manipulation. We're living in a time where truth is either coming back or fiction should replace truth, because what we're hearing now seems almost incredible to be true. What you're going to hear today might take that same leap with you. But most of you, I feel, in this sophisticated audience, because you are into metaphysics, you're not new at it, will probably take it with a grain of salt and do your own research, and I might even verify or again substantiate some research that you've already done yourself. To do so, though, I want to look at some basic concepts that we have about our Earth and to see if they all hold up. We're told in general that our Earth, of course, has a top, a bottom, and an equator, that we're finding out now whether than perfectly spheroid or round like a ball, it's somewhat elongated, again, or bulging more like a donut. They say that the diameter at the equator is 7,927 miles. The polar axis, and that's the idea that the Earth is kind of shifted to the side, not straight up and down, where its top and bottom should be, or north and south poles should be, is 4,900 miles, again, at the area at the top and the bottom. The circumference is said around the Earth itself is 24,960 miles. The latitudinal lines, those that run horizontally, if you would, are what they set up to kind of gauge what is and where is something on the globe itself. If you had a plane or you were driving, they would show your latitude, and your longitudinal lines, of course, are the points that run vertically. So if you're looking at a globe or a map, you would use this more or less to tell where you were. These are fictional lines, and of course, are as our political boundaries. If we looked at our planet without the political boundaries and like this, we would find very interesting things. The Earth is said to be 595 billion tons. I'm not exactly sure how they arrived at that conclusion, but that's the point of area that they're giving, and the weights again. The total surface area of the Earth is said to be 196,950,000 square miles. The land surface said to be 57,510 square miles, and the water surface area again said to be 166,000 square miles. The pressure to the cubic foot, and this always amazes me because I guess we don't really feel that pressure, is said to be 344.7 pounds to the cubic foot. So I guess we have some pretty strong exoskeletons or endoskeletons, whichever you might state. The greatest height, supposedly, on our planet is Mount Everest in the Himalayas at 29,028 feet. The greatest depth, the Philippine Trench in the Pacific Ocean, some 37,982 feet. The Earth also is said to have a molten interior, with the crust, again, resting over this molten exterior, and what they call plateau shift, or continental displacements. We're said that even though the interior is molten, the land area builds up until where the water is, the many continents that extend around it more or less float on what they call plate and tektite plates. I'm sure you heard about that recently on whether Ted Koppel or somebody, Ted Koppel, where he said that there was a blue pyramid, but it was really an illusion because it was formed by two tektite plates rising up and forming a bridge. Well, understand that our continent is said to be on a tektite plate, and if it rolls up, I think either one or other of the shores would be in bad shape. But nevertheless, this is what they're saying. The Earth is said to be 5 to 6.5 billion years old. Now, that figure also gets me because 5 to 6.5 billion years old, that means that there is 1.5 billion years difference. You think 1.5 billion years might be a long time. So when you say 5 to 6.5 billion years, that's really precise, I would think, just 1.5 billion years off, maybe, again. And life on the Earth being only some 2 billions of years old, and that is said to be chemical life. Intelligent biological life with man is said to be only some 8,000 years old, and there's some religious groups to say it's 6,200 years old, because they say that the Garden of Eden and the first man is created 4004 BC. All of these things probably are no more true or no more false than what you're going to soon hear tonight, but I give to tell you that some of the things we hear that we take as statistically correct may not exactly be. And last of all, the distance said from our Earth to the Sun is 93 million miles. But our Sun is only 93 million miles away. Now, they state again that our Earth, again, has a molten interior, that it has an inner core, an outer core, a mantle, and then a shell. The dimensions of the shell is said to be some 30 miles thick, made out of granite and basalt, and of course some sand and loam, if you would. That the mantle itself is supposed to be some 1,800 miles thick. The outer core some 1,360 miles thick. The inner core some 1,630 miles thick, and that interests me too, the 30 miles tag on both of those. And at the molten center can reach temperatures of up to 8,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This is why, again, to live in the center of the Earth, where possible, you would burn up because it is a molten sea of just burning molten lava or whichever else it is. Yet with all of these statistics and all the travel and topography and so that our scientists are able to give, our Earth is still a very mysterious place. And many things happen on it that seemingly don't get into the classrooms, don't make the radio until, of course, recently with the Art Bell show and all, and things that are going on a regular basis that either defy description or causes people to have to maybe look for another analogy in order to reach the conclusion as to what is happening. This is a model Earth globe that you see here. For those of you, of course, that are buying the tape, you'll have to come to some of our lectures. And this globe, as you can see, has no unnatural boundaries. There are no political breaks in it. There's nothing on it, again, that you can see that you know, whether it's Russia or China, Japan, whether it's United States or Africa or Europe. It just shows our globe as it would be if it were twirling in space, as they say it would be again. Good. Now, what you would notice on this globe, as we look at it, is that it has a lot of convolutions and corrugations. It is not smooth. If you notice, even in the water areas of the Pacific and in the water areas of the Atlantic, that there are a lot of ridges and crests, and so they're what they call estuaries, they're what they call ridges, they're valleys, they're mountains, they're fjords, and all of these let you know that this planet has undergone a lot of change. Now, when you take away the unnatural topographical changes and so, you'll see that there are mountain ranges, for instance, here, that runs all the way from Alaska, all the way down the west coast, all the way down into South America, all the way down into Argentina, almost all the way down to South America, or what they call, again, Antarctica, that huge mountain range. Okay? If you notice again, in the Pacific, a lot of convolutions, especially off of New Guinea and off of Japan and the Ryukyu Islands, all kind of things under the water that normally you cannot see. There are ridges, there are estuaries, there are mountains, there are valleys, everything that is there. And if we spin around, I guess we were there, again to the Atlantic area between Africa and our east coast, if you would, you'll notice something there that is very, very interesting. You'll notice again what is called the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, and it runs also past the San Andreas Fault Line. The San Andreas Fault Line is in the Pacific, but the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, you'll see, is a long ridge that goes right down, and it is in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. That is a huge ridge. That means it's like a mountain and a valley that has been carved out of the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean there, and it is a fracture that is in our planet, where something has rendered, whether it was a huge ocean quake. Whether something opened and closed there, it's hard to know, but the ridge is still there. It's called the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. The interesting thing is that when you also look around, you will find some of these mountains that break the surface of the ocean. That's when they're colored kind of green or brown, if you would. And you'll notice where they break the surface of the ocean again, that these are simply mountain ranges, which we now call islands, but we're seeing the tops of these islands, if you would. The Azore Islands are one of those things that are groups that go along what we call our central ridge. They have found writings on many of these mountains, in many of these caves, whether they're beneath the surface of the ocean, or whether they actually pierce the ocean and come up as a mountain range. Writings. Now, if the writing is on something submerged in the sea, it means that either somebody had to put on a diving bell, a diving gear, hold their breath, and begin to carve on mountains now beneath the sea, or at one time those mountains were probably what? Above sea level. Now, if you find these things in the middle of the Atlantic or Pacific Ocean, that begins to kind of stretch the mind. I would think so. There are two kind of writings that the anthropologists, archaeologists, and generally topographers of our earth scientists say. There's what they call hieroglyphs and something called petroglyphs. Hieroglyphs is again from the Greek word hieros, which means sacred. And glyph, of course, means writing, carving, something along this line. So an hieroglyph is said to be sacred writing. I'm not sure exactly what sacred writing means, but that's what the term hieroglyph comes from. Petroglyph is from the Greek word petro, meaning rock, and of course we use petroleum, which is shaved and shale rock, again it's compressed to get oil and gas. And glyph, of course, again is writing. So petroglyph again means simply writing on rocks, not on papyrus or ancient so-called texts, but again on these kind of things. Glyphs are not only found under the water, but they always seem to follow streams that come from the big body of water inland, as though these writings were there and somebody came up the stream, or the streams maybe at one time were bigger than they were now and have now been reduced to streams, whichever way you would. They're found in Ireland, they're found in Spain, they're found in North Africa, they're found in the Canary Islands, they're found in the Virgin Islands, they're found in the Yucatan Peninsula, they're found along the Gulf of Mexico, they're found along the Mississippi River, the Rio Grande, and the Colorado, they're found in the Gulf of California and Baja Peninsula, they're found in Utah, they're found in Arizona, Hawaii, Asia, Babylon, Egypt, China, Japan. Wherever you go, you can find either petroglyphs or what we call hieroglyphs. In the Grand Canyon, they have actually found in that canyon on the sides of the mountain glyphs. And most recently, and let me say also that there are some so-called Indian tribes, we now refer to them better as First Worlders or as original Americans. The ancient name for them was Guatemans and Algonquin, and one of the most ancient names you can find is Incalian, giving them their correct pronunciation for the people that they are. There have been many of them now that are going back to the bottom of the Colorado Rocky Rivers, because in the Grand Canyon they now find that there are streams that are drying up, and in fact the river that used to flow through the bottom of the Grand Canyon is beginning to disperse, it's beginning to break up. And many caves that were hidden beneath this water level are now becoming open. It is a place now where many strange things are happening, including anomalies seen at night and energy arrays that seem to be coming up out of the Grand Canyon itself that can be seen in the night sky, and a lot of activity is happening now in the Grand Canyon of our old world. What I'm simply saying is to you that even though we have come a long way with our science, and in America we're said to have one of the best educational systems around, that there is still a lot to be learned, and a lot of it is not being shared on a regular basis to the people. Because of that, we're going to take a look, not to challenge what is being said, but to possibly add to, because we feel that a lot of the scientists and topographers already know what you're going to learn tonight, but they're not releasing it to the public in general. The Earth has many different things, but in beginning to do studies, they find in the zoologists and the biologists, they refer to, again, animal life and how far and frequent that animal life can be, and they date it, and they have what they then call a term biological life. There are very interesting creatures on our Earth. The camel, which is said to be a very African fauna, Yet the fossil remains of the camel can be found not only in Africa, but in India, in South America, and in our own state of Kansas, which one of the members mentioned today that he had recently went to. They have found fossil remains of the camel, yet they say that it originates only in Africa. What was it doing over here? And if the fossil remains start showing more than 2,000 or 3,000 years ago as being fossilized, how did they get here, and why is it only in one state, Kansas? The horse, which everybody takes for granted again, said to have originated in the Western Hemisphere, yet fossilized remains of a horse can be found in fossil beds in Nebraska, in the Bear Tar Pits, and also found in Asia and throughout Europe, the same type of a horse that we see now. Cattle and sheep are said to be domesticated only and can't live without living in herds nowadays, and yet sheep and so were found in Europe. Carvings of sheep were found in the caves throughout Europe and in the Stone Age, and huge buffalo herds that now roam America were said to have roamed South Central Asia. Buffalo herds, now said to have originated only in the Americas. The cave lion that's found in the southwest of America can also be found in Europe. Yet we found, again, no way that these so-called matings of this animal can take place against whole, huge bodies of water. When we begin to look at some of the flora, if you would, there's the banana, which everybody takes for granted. It's found in Mexico, Brazil, the Hawaiian Islands, and Florida, and most of Central America, including the West Indies. Yet it is a native of said to be tropical Asia and tropical Africa. The banana is generally seedless, cannot be reproduced by cuttings, and it has no tuber or root other than that which is on the tree, but not from the fruit itself, which means, again, how do you do something like that? How does the seed spread unless you're leading to cultivation, unless someone takes it, plants it someplace else other than where it indigently is found? They have found banana supposedly covered with ice, which means that it predated the Ice Age, and at this time, America was not supposed to be tropical. How is it there? Why is it there? Everybody takes wheat, for example, as for granted. Everybody has wheat cakes and wheat bread and so on like this. Wheat has never existed seemingly in a wild state, nor is there any real evidence to trace its descent but what is called previous fossil species. Wheat is found in Europe in 5 different varieties. Somebody had to work with that wheat to give 5 different varieties of it. It's been cultivated during the so-called pre-Sumerian age, and if you read Zechariah Sitchin's book, the pre-Sumerian age means in Mesopotamia, Mesopotamia 1, where they had wheat. And during this time, of course, you had what was called an ice age. How could wheat have still existed during this particular time? And in 5 different kinds of grains, if you would. It's as though, again, somebody had made these grains up, 5 different varieties, and placed them in various areas over our planet, or at least that's one of the ways of looking at it. We have what is called a mixture of languages on our planet. And because of this, it's very hard, unless you do a lot of study, to be able to communicate with each other because everyone speaks a different language. We find now, of course, that there is a converge, if you would, of linguistics where people are beginning to learn and can have people who know one language and act as interpreters. The Phoenicians, from which we get the word phonics and phonetic alphabet, along with the people called the Carthaginians again, use signs for sounds, the type of language used again presently in the Eastern Hemisphere. And for the first time, according to modern anthropologists again, it was used in the Americas no more than about 100 or 250 years ago, someplace in between there. Yet there are many types of languages that are found to overlap. For instance, if you can speak native Hawaiian, and very few people can, and you can speak Gaelic or German, Baal, you'll find that you can understand the same similar language. In fact, there was a big fight that took place just prior to World War II, when a group of German scientists, home-based again in Hawaii, and a group of Hawaiians were in a bar, and the German soldiers again took kind of an off-color joke. It was about a Hawaiian woman, and the Hawaiian guy jumped over and started a fist fight. And it was a big brawl that took place. And when they questioned as to what happened, he says, "Well, what did this guy say to you?" He said, "We didn't say anything to them. We were talking amongst ourselves." But they understood enough of what the language of these German sailors who were speaking more or less Gaelic to know that it was an offensive joke.
Yet they had never learned German, and the Germans had never learned Hawaiian. There is a lot of similarities, and even in dress, with the kilts that are worn, again, by the so-called Irish and Scottish that are found again in Morocco and parts of Jamaica, many places like this. And there's a very interesting thing called a keening whale, which the women, again, in the islands and the women in parts of Africa would go at the death of a person. They would set up a loud wail, or moaning, if you would. And it was idea to honor the dead soul that this moaning or wail would continue. And it was supposed to last for 3 days, and no one is supposed to break it, or else the spirit would be in unrest, which meant if one woman gave up, it was only by the women, the men were not allowed to do this. If one woman gave up the wail, another woman someplace was supposed to take this up. The same practice was done in Ireland. It's called a keening wail, the keening and quickening of the spirit wail. Yet, none of these people knew each other, and where did such practices come? I'm going to cut through a lot of other substantiative things to let you see where I reach a possible conclusion on this to get to the meat of tonight's subject, but I will simply say, if you do a little research, you'll find that there are many anomalies, many strange things about our planet, about the people of the planet, and about the alphabet and language of the planet that makes it very interesting. I'll stop with this one. Many of us now are having a migration, or I might say an immigration, of people that are coming out of Latin America. They're coming out of Argentina, they're coming out of Mexico, they're coming out of Brazil, and they're coming to California, they're coming to the East Coast, they're coming all over in the United States. And the strange things you will see now when you begin to see the native, more or less mestizo or Nambazi that comes out of the South America, they look in many cases like Japanese people. And if you really look carefully, they have slant eyes, they're the same height. You will find again that their skin color is about the same. And if you listen to them when they get excited, they begin to, it sounds just as though they could be native Japanese or even Chinese. Now, I'm saying this to you because you can observe this yourself. The height is the same, the skin color is the same, and even when they talk fast, the language begins to get on a tonality that begins to sound the same too. I'm suggesting that we may be closer to each other than we think. And if we're not for something holistic that happened, we may all be one people. In the Christian Bible, it refers to a time when the languages were confused and that the people were separated. And I'm thinking that some parts of that may be very true with a little research that goes along. When we also look at our earth, we hear strange legends and strange stories. The stories of lost Atlantis. I guess everybody in here could give a dissertation for at least 5 minutes about Atlantis. Said to be a continent that was in the Atlantic Ocean somewhere. That's why it was called Atlantis. That this continent went down through a series of holocausts, and that the thing was pretty quick. It went down supposedly within a week's time. Some say within 3 days' time. And therefore, the legend still persists, supposed to be brought forth by Plato and Socrates. Actually, again, it was taken from Solon, the Egyptian priest, when the Greeks were in captivity there in Egypt before they actually came in with Alexander and took over the area. These were legends and stories that did not just start in Greece, but were carried on by many people. There are legends about a continent that was in the Atlantic that is still held by the people in the Azores, and many people on, again, the west coast of Africa. There are all kind of things about possibly Atlantis. Very little is heard, but some about Lemuria, sometimes called Pan or Mu, and that in Lemuria, which supposedly existed again in the Pacific Ocean, was a continent that was larger than any type of water we have now. That at one time our planet was mainly mainly land more than water, but now it's 3/4 water. It's interesting too, if you look at the Pacific, you will find ridges, you will find islands. Of course, we know about the Hawaiian Islands, the Kwajalein, Saipan. There are many places and many islands dotting throughout the Pacific, some of which are very interesting. If you take a look at Easter Island, some 1,600 miles off the west coast of Chile, you will find again an island that has large statues upon it, statues that are said to be monolith. And nobody can understand how they got there because there is no connecting landmass. The statues are so strong and so hard in weight and tonnage that they couldn't have been taken over by any ship. And yet they've found 22, 44, and I understand now hundreds, because some have even been buried over in topsoil just on the Easter Island area. And some of them are not made of the indigenous basalt that is found on that island. The question becomes, how did these statues get there? If we begin to think in terms of a possible landmass or continent that was there and broke up, and this quarrying and stone was going on, and these are now left isolated from the bigger landmass, it can begin to make sense. If you also notice that one thing in common is held by most of the islanders when you start going back in their history, they all look African, or Negroid is a better way of looking at it now. There are many stories about Queen Kalakalani, Queen Lalakalini, and again, in the Hawaii itself was ruled by a queen and later on a king, that in the Fiji, and if you go again to New Zealand, any place you go, especially even into Australia, it's supposed to be a larger continent, all of these people look very Negrito. And that is a term that is used now by anthropologists, Negritos, that the indigenous people, almost in any place on our earth, if you go back far enough, look Negrito. Small, occipital lobe, they're long-headed, usually peppercorn or kinky hair, large lips, or what they would call now Negroid type of features. This is one thing that is in common no matter where you go. And even though this is the end of Black History Month, this is not where I want to just stop. But to let you know, there is still a common thread wherever we go on our planet. It is just, again, because of racism, and so some of these things are not liberally taught. But I'm telling you it's truth and can be easily verified with a little research. But another thing also seems to come to the fore. When they went to the North Pole, and they talked amongst people that were migrating northward from Canada, they called these people Eskimos. And they asked the Eskimo, in generally, why do you migrate further north sometimes when the weather gets worse? And they asked them, where did they come from? The Eskimo seems to be a composite almost of every race that we see on our planet, and yet lives isolated, or did until very recently, over the last 60 years, from the rest of the people on our Earth itself. The Eskimo does migrate north when the winters come. And they have been found with their igloos, what do they call them again, and some of the trampolines and paraphernalia that they have, far, far up, even past Baffin Island, and into the area which is known now as the iceberg area, which is a little snow crest, as you can see again at the planet, the white line that goes around the top, where there is a snow line, certain latitude that reach there. They asked them, where do they come from? And they said they came from the north. They said, well, of course you don't mean the north, because there's nothing up there but ice and snow. Where do you come from? And they say that their ancestors came from there. But they also found that when they watched some of these tribes of Eskimos, they would leave with very little game, some of their dogs and a few other animals, because of the harsh weather, they didn't keep too many animals. But when they come back the next year, they would have flowers, they would have seeds, they'd have more animals, where the animals had obviously propagated. And they asked them, well, how could you do this in the storm? We said, we came from the north. That up there in the north, there were many wildlife. They had seeds and game and flowers. Well, of course, they were laughed at because everybody understands if you go north, past Canada, you're not going to get seeds and grains and flowers and parakeets and cockatoos and things like this. One other thing began to rear its nasty head was during World War II. Many of the pilots who tried to avoid radar, and some of the gunners, in order to reach to Europe, would go up near the poles. And in many cases, their planes crashed. And if they crashed, they were given provisions, of course, which keep them alive for about 7 days, and usually a cyanide capsule to take again, of course, if their life became too harsh to take. But what they found is that the downed sailors and the downed pilots, some of the shipwreck pilots, sailors again, would say that they were plagued by mosquito bites and sandstorms. That the biggest thing they had to worry about was not so much the further north they went about snowstorms, but mosquito bites and sandstorms, and that the skies sometimes would be full of birds. All of this led to one conclusion later on, which was pretty much reached by a statement made in 1956 by Rear Admiral Richard Evelyn Byrd. When Admiral Byrd went both to the North Pole and later on to the South Pole in 1956, he made a statement. He said that this expedition has opened up a vast new territory, and that this expedition will actually be the most important one that ever has been done on the planet Earth that we know about. What he talked about as he went 2,600 miles into the South Pole and 1,600 miles into the North Pole, when he flew in an airplane, not by dog sled and all like this, he actually flew planes, that the further north that they went, the more that they found green vegetation, the more that they found even what looks like a giant woolly mammoth, the more that they found flowers, the more that they found everything else. And the same thing happened when they went deep into the South Pole area. What they stated was, and what they tried to hide, was that our planet does not have poles. And I even found out, which you can do some checking yourself, that there are no polar flights. Now, they might be now with some of these supersonic airplanes that go about now doing Mach 2 and Mach 3, but in most cases there were no polar flights. The flights that they called polar flights would be that a plane would take off from someplace in the United States, we're talking about now, would go up near the pole, but instead of going over the pole, it would go around the pole and then go to the area that was going to, whether it was there or not, that there are no polar flights. And one of the reasons they found that there were no polar flights is the same type of thing that's now occurring again on our Earth. Too many crashes. Now you're finding out that the planes are crashing because the electricity does not work. They're finding out now that the transponders and when you're looking at the radar equipment, no longer function. The gyro mechanisms do not function well. And the people were following, the planes were following the curvature of the Earth, and next thing you know, they crashed into the ground. An anomaly that is again, we say, beginning to happen as we speak now. What they found was that the Earth was not, as we have been taught, that there are no North Poles and South Poles, that all of the things were always in dispute from the time when the British explorer, and I forget his name right now, all the way to Admiral Byrd and all like this, that they did not get to the North Pole. And there's a lot of debate for those things. That's why they have asterisks beside their names about discovering the North Pole. Metaphysics states and research states that there are no poles on our Earth. That the area that's supposed to be pole is a huge opening. That opening is at both ends of our planet. And that opening leads into what we now call the inner world. That there is a portion of our planet that we have not been told about that can be accessed either through the North or South Pole. And there are areas also that connected, as we should say, that get to be very, very interesting. Found that there was a satellite that was placed up in orbit that was called the ESSA 3 and ESSA 7. This is some time ago, in the again about mid-50s, and this photograph that you're going to see was one made by the ESSA 7 when a cloud covering that was generally over the North Pole was moved aside, and what was able to be seen was a distinct hole leading into the interior. This is something that is very hard to get. They say it was never published, but I give you a picture of supposedly the ESSA photograph, which shows distinctly an opening there at the poles. The same thing was repeated at the North and South Poles. The same kind of opening was seen, leading into the Earth. The conjecture has been, and we will get more into that as we proceed in this series of the inner world, that many planets may possess the same thing. And the idea is that if one planet is hollow and our moon is solid, then we have a phenomenon that cannot exist. If ever we prove that our Earth is open and hollow, then the moon must also be hollow, or it would crash into each other, because a solid and a hollow cannot stay side by side in a very balanced orbit. If this postulation holds, it sets up a whole new concept about our science. And this is why this is one of the reasons, not the only one, as you will find there will be many reasons, why this kind of thing has not been revealed. But this is, again, ESSA 3 and ESSA 7's photograph of supposedly the openings to the poles. Ancient ones have said for a long time that there have been people that lived inside the Earth. If we hear about Orpheus's adventure to the underworld, if we hear about Amenta and the land of Styx, by which there were said to be rivers and people that were believed in by the Egyptians and the Nubian people. Here's another cross-section in general of the whole philosophy, with the dimensions being given of the inner side, and of course the inner sun. Again, there have been numbers of books that refer to this concept, and of course whether or not we believe it is a matter of opinion. But there was a book put out by Marshall Gardner, along about the 1890s and so, called Journey to the Earth's Interior. There was another book put out not too long ago by a man by Emerson. It came out in the 50s called The Smoky God, referring to what was said to be the inner sun or proton sun in the center of our Earth itself. There's another one which received a lot of acclaim, which you've probably heard about, The Hollow Earth by Dr. George Bernard, who also went to talk about Admiral Byrd and Admiral Perry's events and what was said to be found there and the things that didn't seem to hold up about vegetation and fossil remains. There is one that hardly anybody has heard about called The Shaver Mystery. It was a book written by Richard Shaver. This came out in the early 40s, and it's been one of the most hidden set of books because there was almost 8 of them, and many people don't even know that they ever existed. Recently, again, there was the Holy Tabernacle Scrolls by Dr. York, and also the Earth Chronicles by Zechariah Sitchin, which all refers to, again, the possibility of there being life forms inside the Earth. Many of the so-called hippies in the early 60s and into the early 70s again talked about what they called Alexander Tolkien's Middle Earth, by which a lot of trolls and little pollutions and so lived, and it was said that they were visited and that many of the people that came out of the Caspian and Caucasian mountains were people who used to live in Middle Earth. And this is how this whole thing got started, when they found drawings in the back of these caves there that seem to refer to another land. This is a book also. I have one of the original versions of The Hollow Earth by Dr. George Bernard. These are also books now that are hard to find. Having had the pleasure and privilege of meeting Dr. York, I also have one of his scrolls that talked about this. And, of course, we sold for a long time Zechariah Sitchin's books. Of course, I say these are not the only things, because you can find throughout the Bible, you can find in the El Quran, you can find in the Papuba, you can find in the stanzas of Diziam, also references to inner worlds, inner life, and the fact that the surface people have never been the intelligent ones, that they were always guided by the gods that were in the earth. And you've even heard references to the gods that were in the earth and giants in the earth. Of course, now we laugh at these things. Maybe I feel in the next 7 months the laughter will stop, because I make a statement automatically. Many of the UFOs that we think come from outer space come from our own planet. As races of people, when calamities have come, have gone to hide inside the earth itself. And one of the biggest battles being fought now is for possession for some of the biggest cities, by which there is air conditioning, by which there is a pollution vaporizer, by which there is wonderful mechanisms, and the battle is still being fought 30 miles down. Now, when you bring out these kind of things, you begin to step into deep waters. And I think that our planet is already in very deep waters as it goes. There is a hum that is being heard by many people. It's been referred to as a Tao's hum. It is stated that this hum can be heard in valleys, can be heard in deserts, can be heard in cities at times, can be heard in rural areas where you get away from a lot of the city cacophony, and that this hum seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, but they can hear it best near the ground. The Tao's hum is a drilling operation using what is called a mole, M-O-L-E, molecular organizing laser equipment, a mole, in which they had to actually construct the thing down in the earth itself. They took it down at least 3 miles, and they found that there were tunnels and huge beds there, and huge tunnels, sometimes as large, if I can give an example here, if we go right out here to 60th Street by the Museum of Science and Industry, we run all the way down to 12th Street. That's a tunnel. The height, again, could be anywhere from 800 to 1,000 feet high. These are tunnels, not caves, but tunnels that go throughout our planet from one part to the other. Thank you. These tunnels are also now being augmented. Do not let them fool you when they begin to finally reveal this. They are not being built by this molecular organizing laser equipment, or called mole. They are simply being tunneled out further, or using existing tunnels to make more. This activity is going on, especially when Russia started to dig one of them to reach again by going through what they always talked about was the Bering Straits, by which they stated many migration patterns took place. I doubt that seriously. But they were digging an area to go undergo Alaska, going underneath the oceans there. And this project has been called by many tapes the Globe Project, and it's had many other projects too. There is a lot of activity going on underneath our surface. I state that some of it is being done by the United States government, some of it is being done by the Russian government, although Russia is now said to not exist as a state. And some of it is being done by people who they don't know who they are. And this activity is happening beneath the surface of our planet on a regular basis. And that hum is a drilling, liquidizing machine that is actually, or was actually, boring through large areas. It is possible now to go from one continent to another without going in the air or taking a ship, by going underground, using the ancient tunnels and whole areas that are now considered to be caves. If we take the same scenario or concept and follow it again, the idea seems to be that our Earth not only has a hollow, but it has a series of interconnecting tunnels leading down to what is called the actual center of the Earth itself. On the board, I'm going to show you a large example of what we're talking about. If the Earth has an opening, that opening goes down to the North Pole to the South Pole, and again exits at both the poles, which we are saying now, for the point of this concept, does not exist. That our Earth actually breathes from north to south, and that an emitter is the soul of Earth, or what you would call the proton sun, giving off energy that is vented through the north and south poles, which is sometimes referred to as the aurora borealis. That when you go far enough, trying to go over the poles, if you follow the land curvature, you'll wind up going inside, and you follow the land curvature until you exit the other side. But the only thing is, when you're doing that flight, you're going to see things that look a little differently, and the sun will seem to change polarity and brightness. Because when we're looking at the huge sun rays outside, you'll suddenly begin to pick up what they call the smoky god, a kind of a smoky and cloud surrounded, because there's a lot of moisture there, sun that looks different from the other sun, and seems to be what they call the land of the midday sun, or the noonday sun. This is why if you go further enough north or south, you'll seem to go into a time when the sun has existed for almost 9 months. In many cases, if you stay static there or you're moving, it might take you that long to go through the interior to exit at the other port. If you're living inside the curvature, as some of these landmasses do, then you'll be seeing a different sun, and if you back up a little bit, you'll begin to see the sun go away. What is called woolly monoliths and so-called saber-toothed tigers and many things supposedly exist inside the Earth itself. And from time to time, they're flash frozen. By swimming in the waters, either from natural predators or none, they'll get washed away into the North Pole area, and then the water begins to freeze. One of the things that they found, and there's a checklist, is that icebergs are always composed of fresh water. One of the questions that has always plagued scientists is how can icebergs be made of fresh water and found in saltwater oceans, and encased in them sometimes mammoths that supposedly ceased to exist a long time ago, but they now have green vegetation in their mouth. And they say, well, they must have been flash frozen, which is proof of a galactic terminal or some kind of a holocaust at which ice and a flash flood froze everything. I state that that is not the case, that they still exist, and that from time to time they get on these little cakes of ice because they wander too far, it breaks loose, and then as it gets into the colder areas which exist here, rather than at the poles, they're frozen, and therefore they're now seemingly partly intact. Of course, they died from suffocation, but the green vegetation that they were eating that could be found inside the Earth is still there. The second phenomena is that Earth is said to be honeycombed with both mountains, mountain ranges, islands, and caves. If you're a speleologist or any type of a person who likes to go into caves, you will understand that there are caves all over our planet. And the Earth is said for this segment to be divided into 6 sections, or 6 levels, if you will, leading down to the hollow itself. Each of these levels affords more space when you take and combine than you have totally to live on the surface. Why? Because there's 6 levels with that same type of surface area, each one becoming more concentric as we get near the end of it. But in there are huge caves, as big as cities and larger, connecting tunnels going to different levels if you know where they are, so that you could go actually down into the Earth for a long time. You're going to hear more and more about Mel's holes all over the place, and now you can understand what Mel's hole may be. How many are familiar at all with the Mel's hole philosophy? Just a few. That is a person who supposedly lived up in Oregon or again on the West Coast in some of the areas that found a hole that people had been throwing Frigidaires into, dumping dirt and garbage into, even car parts into for the longest time, and they never hit the bottom and the hole never filled up. He called in one time on Art Bell's show. It's a very interesting show nowadays. I'm not acting as a proponent for it, but I'm saying you want to hear the way out stuff, that's where you can now hear it. Because one guy called up and told him about this. He likes to hear strange phenomena type things. And he said, well, they had been doing this for a long time, and that recently, though, he began to get a foul smell that was coming out of there, and also light rays that seemed to be coming out of there. So he called in because of this. The next day, after he was on the show, and he had him on for about 3 hours, and he even made a song out of it called Mel's Hole Now. He was bedecked with MIBs, men in black, and then later on by the United States government forces who, whether because he was now, supposedly this show is listened to by up to 20 to 40 million people each night, whether they just take him on out, they actually paid him to get off the land. First of all, they told him he had to get off the land. It was government property. Well, if you understand what eminent domain means, none of us own anything here anyway. So it's just a matter of whatever situation arises by which they invoke eminent domain. But nevertheless, they came, took over his property, and he was gone. Paid him a handsome amount and told him to keep his mouth shut. He is gone. These kind of stories about deep holes or suddenly fractures appearing where vapor and sulfur seems to come out have prolonged and existed for a long time. If you take this kind of a concept, then you can begin to see that there could be many Mel's holes. And when you begin to hear about the legends of creatures inside the earth, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're inside the earth at a hollow, even if this is a phenomenon. It means that they can be living on any of these levels. Now, two things stop you from believing that. We've been told that when you go into the earth, it gets hotter and hotter. That is molten lava. This is what volcanoes all are. Understand that any mountain range you see was once a volcano. One of the biggest ones, of course, we have, right out here at the West Coast when you fly right over the Rocky Mountains. That is this long range that we showed you here. And when you look again at this, you can see, again, it extends all the way from almost up here at the pole, all the way down. Now, this was caused by a fracture. I make you another. Pacific smashing against the west coast of America, causing it again to rise up, and you can see that whole thing would happen there. If you check again, how many of you have been out to the west coast recently or sometime in the past? Just raise your hand if you will. Okay. Interesting thing, if you flew out there, if you went out there by rail or by car, you notice again you have to cross the Rockies, and you find the elevation going up and coming down. That's very interesting. If you flew out there, you actually have to cross this huge desert area, and then you get to see this mountain range. Once you cross it, things change. Not only is the vibration out there different, they laugh about the West Coasters, but trees got bigger, they got more tropical, you had fruits and things that you still can remember if you're into produce, and many of you know are vegetarians in there. Your best produce used to come from California. It was sweeter, bigger, seemed to be more fulfilling, had more nutrients, amino acids, vitamins, and everything else within it. Well, that is because, according to the metaphysical teachings and research, because that was not part of Algonquin, which is the old name for what we call now America. That was part of Lemuria, that huge continent that broke up here in the South Pacific, crashed against part of it, causing this ridge as it engrafted itself with the Algonquin continent. Therefore, the United States is composed of many different types of things, if you would, different not only of creatures, but of land masses. And the Rocky Mountains west looks much different from the Rocky Mountains east. Just as we went to the Alleghenies, things changed there too. In the area that we now call Pennsylvania, and the area of Ohio, there is a peat moss fire that has never been put out. They cannot put it out. And this is why you will find most things over there very desolate. And except for the Blue Ridge Mountains and so, you will find in the Black Hills, you will find almost everything is very desolate. This is why you can get a lot of petroleum and oil fields there. But underneath is still a fire that they cannot put out, because underneath the area of Pennsylvania, there is a whole tunnel, or shall we say a whole continent full of moss, peat moss. And that peat moss is constantly burning. That's why the area there is always very warm, and that's why when they begin to drill oil wells in there, they can hit the petroleum beds. Because they hit a petroleum bed there does not necessarily mean that all around on that latitude around our planet, there are petroleum beds. Some of these cases, along with this philosophy, there are whole areas there of caves and even temperatures. Most temperatures at the cave is what, 60 degrees? 62.7 or something. Most mean temperatures of caves is the same. By the way, it is now a felony. Now, I don't remember when that went through Congress, but somebody passed it, to go into a cave alone. Did you understand that? To be found in a cave now is a felony. Now, I never knew that because when you go to Mammoth Cave, Lookout Mountain, you go to all these places, of course, you go on these tours. But now somebody passed a law about going into caves. It's been stated that in Chicago, right here alone, we're underneath at this very area we are, landfill. If you remember about the World's Fair Exposition, where they built the Museum of Science and Industry over there, that this area, from at least the Bed Lake as it wraps around going into Indiana, all the way down to near Wisconsin, many cases is landfill. They wanted to get closer to the water area, so they filled it in. The cave, in many cases, extended out to Halsted and in some places Ashland Avenue, as it was peninsulas in this area. What is also interesting about it, if you get one of the topographical maps, and I don't know if you can still get it, and this is one of the reasons, too, as I ramble a little bit, when they had the flood here in Chicago, they were very worried downtown because there is a whole tunnel that leads all the way out underneath the lake. And if you saw the movie Relic, it even pointed that out to you. If you remember again, when they had that flood, they were worried about certain things happening because that water could have gone all the way over to Ashland Avenue and in many cases made the ground there very saturated. And with the floods we're getting, that might be one of the things that they're using as an excuse to hide that fact. This whole area has a huge underground tunnel areas. Interesting enough, too, as we speak just about Chicago, there are two churches, one at, I will name them, one at 64th and Kenwood, the other there at Woodlawn at 63rd, that actually have tunnel entrances that match with those tunnels down there. They have openings beneath them. And many things have been said to have occurred strange in those two churches there, too. There are two different denominations, but if you go by there, you'll still see them. This is a strange area, as we find most of our planet when we are not told about the subterranean areas, the subterranean tunnels, and the subterranean caves. Now, we're going to take a huge leap. The leap we now take is, if these places exist, why is it that people don't live there? Or why is it, again, if they have this mean temperature, and some way or another they can have air, some way or another things can, wildlife or life can be there, why aren't they well known, and why aren't they occupied? The story is that they are occupied. That there is a life form and have been life forms on our planet that we have not been told about. And that as we feel that there have been ages that came when the dinosaurs left and the time for the woolly mammoth is gone and the multi-tusked elephant, that these creatures still do live there, because it's said that near the center of our earth is a tropical paradise. It has had many names, and there have been many legends. I'm going to go over some of the names and legends, and many of you will recognize them. Some of you may recognize all of them. Some of you will recognize none of them, but I'll go into it again. It's called the Greek Olympus. In the Vedic, it's called Mount Meru or Hermaldry. In Scandinavia, it's been called the Hedus or Esar. The Egyptians referred to the area as Amente, the city of 7 petals of Vishnu, the Buddhists and the Brahmins believe in. The city of the 7 kings of Edom, believed in by some Christians and some Jewish people. The Eden of the Hebrew and later Jewish people, again, was the same 7 petals or 7 kings kingdom. The Tibetans and the Mohammedans, again, believe in Shambhala, or the city Sham of Allah. The Persians, Alberti, or Aryana. The Hebrew, Canaan, and the land of Canaan. The Mexican, Tula, or the Tolans and the Tolanites. The Aztecs, Maya, and Mayapan. The Spanish, El Dorado, the city of gold. The Aborigines, Manoa, and the place of manna that flew from the heavens. The Celtics, Duat, or Danada. The Chinyans, or what now called the Chinese, the land of Shivin, or the land of Chinye. The Isle of Avalon and King Arthur, the British Isles. The German, Walhalla, and if you remember again, I forget it was Mussorgsky, it wasn't Mussorgsky, somebody else who wrote this Ride to Valhalla, and so talked about the Firebirds, and so that went there, the Firebird Suite. The English, Utopia. There have been many names, of course. There are many books talking about Shangri-La. Then Shan meaning earth, and Grilla meaning the hidden place, Shangri-La. Paradise, Cocochique, Kalki. All of these people are talking about a so-called place where people live forever or for a very long time, where there's milk and honey, where there's strange fruit, the animals get along with people and all these kind of things. And of course, they've been referred to as legends. Let me state here now that one of the great secrets of the pyramids, which they're about ready to reveal because one of the earthquakes that hit has already ruptured it, is that beneath the Great Pyramid, there is another pyramid, and that is found in the bottom of this huge cave by which people used to be able to render to the Pyramid of Giza by following 8 paths, 8 tunnels leading to any part of the earth you wanted to go to. And when they had their meetings, the people would not travel on the surface. They would come up through these caves, and some of the openings, of course, are still there. Another thing you must now understand is that the Sphinx was built long before the pyramid, and the Sphinx looked like a Negroid woman. As we'll find, most planets have Negroid women Sphinx. They found also that the pyramid was then built by those people from Atlantis and the lost Lemurians, and again people from another planet who came here to share architecture to balance our Earth itself. Now, this sounds way out. The big thing that they had in common and why it's hard to duplicate now is that they understood that the Earth was hollow. They understood that gravity consisted of the push of this inner sun, this proton sun, and then the vortex set up by the outer sun. And once you used and tuned into those vibrations, you could travel with a whole new means of propulsion. You could levitate things, and people caught in that area began to quicken in spirit. They began to be able to astral project. They began to be very psychic, and many people could not take the vibrations. As it was said, the gift of the god had not been given to them. The gift of the god, we'll find out, was Melanin. This will be on as we're going to do these things in series. Now we reveal to you everything that all these top scientists know, so you too have a chance to do whatever you wish to do with the ideas, concepts, or study. Many of the species of people that we now call Earthians did not all originate the same way. There are legends of people at the gates of Nuremberg. If you hear about it, you can do some research, called the Green Ones, in which it was said in the late 1890s, near the turn of the century, that there were 2 green people that appeared at the gates of Nuremberg, Germany. They were green, one was male, one was female. They were an anomaly and, of course, were almost taken up as a sideshow, except that they were well-formed, shorter than the statue, and, of course, the people there were very fair in the main. These people were green. It is called the story of the Green Ones. It's easy enough to find. The reason why I bring that out is because one of them died. The boy died. The girl was able to eat the food that was here and lived. And as she ate the food and lived, she turned pink and looked like any other German Nuremberg citizen. The boy died because he could not adapt to that. The green coloring left him. And when they questioned the girl, when they taught her very intelligent, they taught she learned to speak German, and what she told them was that she came from a land inside, that there were many levels of this land, but she lived in a particular one where green vegetation was everywhere. That the light came from an unknown source, but it seemed to emit from the caves and through big openings in her cave central. They stated again that these kids went on a little picnic, and so they wandered away from the rest of the people, got lost in the tunnels, saw a great light, and came up and found that they'd hit the surface, as they had only heard legends of the surface and did not believe it. She went on to talk about a lot of things, and then suddenly one day, after she had already, as they say, amalgamated, and so she went on to the forest and disappeared. And they never understood what happened to what they call the story of the Green Ones. But if you'll find that, you'll find that there are legends persisting of strange creatures all over our planet. If you go into South America, near the Yucatan and the place there, you'll hear the story of what they would call the gill man. The gill man also is a gill woman. You've probably heard about the creature from the Black Lagoon. Except for the height of it, supposedly that there are in an area called Lake Pupu, down in the Raticambo jungle areas, and down there near where the rivers, Lake Pupu is, that this is where they have found little creatures that walk around, that have gills and breathe, but they walk upright. They have webbed appendages, and from time to time have tried to mate or steal earth women, or surface women, if you would, and the amalgamation, of course, was seemingly successful in many cases. There's all stories about these little web creatures, and they make a high grunting sound, a high pitch sound, or a low grunting sound, whichever again. But those stories persist everywhere. If you go to certain areas of Africa, you'll find another strange tribe, the anomalies, in which again there are people that look African, very tall, but their feet are claws. They have actually 3 toes with hooks on them, like a bird. There are stories and pictures. I think somebody brought a picture of that into us about 3 weeks ago, of this strange tribe of people. There are always, again, anomalies that have been kind of shushed off because no one understood why they came about or where they came from. But you will also find that the great religions of Earth all have one thing in common. They believe in a central figure. That central figure in many cases does not look like the other figures look, but everybody believes that they would come. And they usually have 2 supporters along with it. I give you this particular idea. In Greece, there is multiplicities of what they call gods and golden ages, and these people have usually come from inside the earth or down from a great mountain. In Greece, they have Uranus, Kronos, and Zeus, who supposedly came to the people and had 2 even higher prelates that instructed them as to what to do. In India, there's a story of Deus Pitar, Indra, and Varuna. Again, a trinity of people who supposedly either came from the sky or from mountaintops and raised the consciousness of the people. In Israel, they have God, Yahweh, and Jehovah, and supposedly one of those you could not even say. That is supposedly Yahweh, or the tetragrammaton. You're not supposed to say W-Y-H-Y. I don't know why you can't say it, because as a person with melanin, I'm allowed to say whatever I want on this particular planet. But again, these legends have persisted with it, and it comes back and forth again. In Egypt, they had Atum, Osiris, and Horus, the Trinity again. In Iran, they had Baya, Admiral Mazda, and Mithra. In Phoenicia, they had God, El, and Baal. The Hittites had Anu, Kamarbi, and Tesurbi. The Mexicans had Amalato, Quetzalcoatl, and Quetzalcoatl. One thing they all had in common: they were all dark-skinned, some of them blue-black, some of them with scales, some of them with tails. But all of them had great powers, and they came to bring certain religions to all of these people. Even in the story of the laws of Hammurabi, by which it is said some of the finest laws and the finest consciousness was brought to people from a mound on Babylon by Shamash, who gave the laws to Hammurabi, who brought them to his people. All of us are pretty much familiar with the Jehovah and Moses and the 10 Commandments that came down from Mount Sinai. Another one you hear about is Zeus, who gave the Cretan laws to Minos on Mount Ida. All these mountains where these people go up, and suddenly when they come back, they're transfixed. They begin to transpose the consciousness of the people. And of course, this is believed in by many of the people who are Mohammedans again, that the Archangel Gabriel showed Muhammad a golden tablet at the hills of Mecca. All of these things are showing that something happens from time to time where people are transfigured by going to a mountain where they see a great light that does not go out, and then they're changed. What was very much hidden and is just beginning to be revealed now was, for almost 4 years during the 1970s, we're not talking about 1870 and all now, down in Mexico City and down in many areas of Guatemala, a huge light came over the city, and for almost 3 years, off and on, people were being beamed up and beamed down. A whole group of people were transposed, transfixed, or something done to. The press refused to cover it. You only had some leakings coming out, and I have some of those clippings, I'll bring them one time, that happened down there near Mexico City and many of the little jungle enclaves. If you know down there, if you go down to South America, they have whole highways now saying you're now going to UFO territory. If you remember just the other day, they had a huge UFO that was seen over Mexico City. People are always seeing these little saucers or something shapeshift coming and going. And the Aztecs, Mayans, and the people that they do not refer to, the Olmecs, all had pictures of these golden tablets, supposedly the sun disk, the sun gods, the people that came with this, and they wore headdresses, and many of them look serpentine-like. And they still have the same headdresses with the serpent type of a nose, nostril, if you would, and the petals or leaves or whatever you want to call it, the headdress going back. If you notice some of the dances of the mestizos and Nambizis and the people that are in South America, the dances still show some kind of a god that looks like a serpent and the big golden plate or the disc that was supposedly where they came from. The flat, what they call ziggurat there, shows a top that is flat, as you see the other pyramid, which is an equilateral triangle. The ziggurat, supposedly a craft, could land on the top, and those openings were doorways by which the people could come out of the bottom of this craft, walk down and be honored. And everywhere you find that kind of a ziggurat, you will find serpentine figures figures of snakes, or the upright walking serpents, which had many names. One of the type of races that supposedly lives inside the earth is a serpentine race, but they're said not to be indigenous to the earth itself, but to simply use, as their ancestors did, certain tunnels and certain cities by which they are told that those people that they helped create and their own could be taken from time to time to be questioned and so on like that. This is their right. Down also you will find in certain areas there a people that look somewhat Nordic, only much taller, the golden plumb lines, if you would. You'll find also Negritos and people who look almost like Olmecian, and if you're not sure about the Olmecs, go back and do some Black history study about how the Olmecs look. And in many cases, when you're hearing about Mayans and Aztecs, especially the ancient Aztecs and the Mayans, they're really Olmecian people who had an understanding that came to this planet from another place and understood again their own. Earth people on the surface are an experiment. Earth people on the surface are already a mixture of many things. But the one thing that they gave to the true surface man was the ability, when the golden age would again resume, to be able to exist and live through it. They gave the gift of the gods melanin. And melanin is an adaptogen. That's why they cannot break it down yet. They don't know how to make it. They cannot reproduce it. They can only utilize it in this form and help to enhance it. It was a gift given to those prototypes put on the surface to be able to go anywhere on the planet, to be able to communicate telepathically with their creators, and be able again to adapt to whatever happened. Other surface people was reported again engrafted mixtures, and they're doing the same thing again, because the Atlanteans that were good escaped, in many cases, saved their lives by going inside. The Lemurians, who were warned about it, went both to the moon and also inside our own Earth, and created whole cultures and civilizations in which they still exist. They have contacted usually those that look like them. From time to time, they will send emissaries up to communicate to the people who they feel have been able to genetically operate on a higher frequency and can take the strain. Many people are properties, and they've already been stamped. That's what we call birthmarks. Sometimes you see same stamping, interesting stampings on the body, and you'll find that the same stampings will be on an Asiatic, will be on an African, will be on a Caucasian. And yet they are different races, genetics, and have different dialects. It's because their skin was already stamped and certain souls were put into them. One of the things that is happening now is as our sun changes frequency, our inner sun is also changing frequency. It is changing to a point where people who cannot raise vibrations will no longer be able to stay on the surface, and they must go home. They must go to those who first propagated them, and they must then be altered, or else they'll have to be taken off the planet, or they'll have to come out of their bodies. This is why death is much different than what we've been told, and many people will experience death because those souls cannot go into the new age. One of the blessings and choices given is people who have been given the gift of the gods. It means again that you're an old soul, and you have that privilege. That gift of the gods is again melanin. If you can honor that melanin, you not only can go into the inner worlds, but you can go on the surface wherever you want, as long as you don't alter the structure of the melanin or the sites, which we call cells, or the glands and organs that can take that melanin in, because it automatically will raise frequency and will match whatever frequency is coming from the inner sun as well as the outer sun. Gravity, of course, is a product of the inner sun pushing against what is called the vortex field of the outer sun, and once you can understand that and build plates, again, that can hold this energy, anti-gravity machines will fill the air as they are. The reason why there is more energy in the earth than you can ever get from the sun or from petroleum is because the energy is being pushed out constantly through the breath holes of our earth, the North Pole and the South Pole, and constantly streaming around in the energy field. One other thing which I want to state here now and make it very clear. What you're not taught in general is vortex and vortexia. And without that kind of a phenomena, which you can take or leave, but at least I'll explain it to you, you cannot explain gravity, you cannot explain the storms that are coming, or most other things that are happening on our planet. And that concept is simply this. Well, I don't see the eraser. Someone? Oh, thank you. Thanks a lot. That concept is simply this. that what we call gravity and storms and so on like this is a principle by which most planets and systems are built. It is called a vortex field, or vortexia. Vortexia means that if our planet is here, instead of being in orbit around our sun as we're taught, and constantly spiraling and all like this with the sun rising and having an axis tilt, we are actually in what is called a vortex, which is like a double pyramid. But it is not shaped precisely like an equilateral triangle pyramid. It is more curved, like a flame. And our planet is within it. This vortex field either spreads from left to right or right to left, depending on the vortex and the planet. All planets have their own vortex. Our sun has a major vortex, which encompasses the vortex of all planets. And let's just say that these planets are all in orbit. Let's just say that this is a huge sun here, for people's all exaggeration, and that the sun vortex more or less is like this, so that all planets are in a field or a vortex with their own little vortex, no matter where they are in position in orbit around our sun. These vortex fields stabilize the inner sun of planets with the outer area of affectation, the area again by which they are influenced. And the sun has a huge vortex, which now when they cross has been called ley lines or magnetic field grids. These things create what is called gravity, and it's very easy once you understand how to produce your own little vortex around something to then be pushed away by one sun from a planet, caught up in the gravitational field of another one, pulled to it. The whole idea is not how to travel. The point is how to, again, get in the frequency, because each planet has a different frequency. Our planet is changing frequency at its poles, so therefore you're going to see a thought of a lot of aurora borealis. You're going to hear more and more sightings of things coming out of the Earth, because one of the things that they do, if there is intelligent life, is not to contact the surface people, who they realize are simply, what can I say, creations. They contact the real intelligent life in Shambhala, Agartha, or in the inner Earth. That's why they're usually seen at certain latitudes, and they're always making their way to either a cave entrance, if it's big enough, under the ocean where they can hide, or going down. And there are craft called Brahmanas that are used by the people inside the Earth, and sometimes called Vedlas, used by people that are on the orbiting satellite, which we call our moon. All planets that have moons have all automatically intelligent life, because they were put up to stabilize that kind of life. And I'll end with this one. Many of the people that make contact here are from Mars. And they're from Mars because there's a large contingent of Martians that live inside of our Earth and have always had intercourse, if you might as well say, with certain people here. Once they reach certain vibration, they were taken away to what is called Master of Mars. The reasons why now they have found the pyramid in Mars is because it was shown to them finally that the same people that are here are on Mars also. When they found black people on Mars, they wanted to stop the whole show. When they found the black woman was progenitor of the original life on Earth as well as Mars, they couldn't handle it, and this is why you're now seeing the Martian probes, and why they don't want to take a close-up view of the Martian Sphinx, because it is a Sphinx of a black woman, and it looks that way, just as the Sphinx out in Giza was too. They're having to now fight a battle for who will control the first three levels of the underworld, which has been cleared out as a way to hide if these fields of energy become too intense, and they do start dropping out bombs and chemical weapons. Nothing chemical can stay the same once it crosses the poles, because they have one of the best air cleaners around. So even if the energy is there, if you go near the poles, you can survive, simply because it's cleaning there. But the vibrations of the planet will change there first, which means to go there now is to commit suicide, because the vibrations would kill you. You'd have either a heart attack, the blood would congeal, or so on like this. So we're at a point now of mutating once again. As far as I want to take this one tonight, I think I've covered enough territory to create a lot of concentration and questions. I only say this: there's no truth till you decide what truth is, and this one is no more than the fairy tales that you've been told in school for a long time about our planet Earth. I thank you very much, and give me some applause if you will. Take the great libraries, which told about some of this phenomena. which had on parchment and in books again, because they had printed words, and they even had discs that could be played through an electromagnetic field that was set up again when people got smart enough to be able to use them. And they found these things. They found out a way to begin to get some of the information off, and they hid the information. The stanzas from the Book of Dizian still tell close to the truth. It's one of the people believed in by the Papuba and the people down in Kish and so of South America, because they told about the Dracons, they told about the prodigies of the Dracons, they told about the serpent people and the inside and how they came to claim their own. And of course you have many of these stories and legends about Verachocha, about all these gods that look funny and different. Everybody is not from the same creator. That's one of the biggest lies ever told. Every soul may come from a central creator, but the gods differ. And some people's gods you would not want to behold. Some people's gods you might want to worship, it would be strictly through fear. And that's why, again, we have such an amalgamation and so of so many things, and people find it different. The gift of the gods from the underworld, say a person by the name of Seth, was melanin. And melanin is given to a body, whichever type of body it was that the soul chose to inhabit, would be able to change vibrations and change frequency. Vibrations and frequency. Those are the things to remember now. And let each cell contain itself without bursting and rupturing, and change that frequency, and let the person, the soul, still stay in, which we call life. Open for questions, statements, or comments. Seth. Yes. The Seth material again, Sethantus. The name was Sethantus. They shortened it to Seth, supposed to be the god of the underworld, especially for black people.
That's with the F-E-T-H.
Yes.
That's not that same stand that are down in the bottom.
Well, again, like I say, that's a whole different kind of field of study again. They have misnamed many things, especially, as I say nicely, in our religious texts, because they've taken out books that should never have been taken out. At the library at Ulm, which was sacked by Alexander and the so-called Alexander the Great, I call him Alexander the Macedonian, they renamed it the Alexandrian Library. Those people couldn't build anything. They had no religion. They couldn't even well talk. That's why the term Greek to me is used. But they went there, and there was a great temple library at Ulm, which not only had pictures of the changelings and things like this, but a whole different concept of literature was there. They took that over, renamed it later on the Alexandrian Library, and of course they had a library at Pergamo, which they destroyed. Many libraries which began to teach these things that had pictures and drawings of these things, they burnt them, changed them. The last thing they found was in the Qumran scrolls, and now called the scrolls that the Israeli had. I can't think of the name of it now. The Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, they kept them there for close to 16 years. You can keep them now. I don't want them. Whatever they altered or changed, but they have that information. One of the also interesting things, too, is one of the big fights in the Mideast is for the city of Lebanon. Not for Lebanon surface, but sub-Lebanon. The underground city, which is the easiest one to reach and which people could now live down there as the air is correct for it, and which they want control of. The battle that you hear going on is beneath your very feet for the fighting, the possession of some of these cities that they can now live in. That's why they had that in report from Iron Mountain and many other things that they have not revealed to you, and that's why they have the Mole project going on, to try and escape from the surface if they cannot adapt to the new frequencies. Questions or comments?
The car that referred to in an ancient Egyptian text, is that the new image what you're talking about now, the magnetism, what they would that refer to magnetism, the car?
The Ka? Well, the Ka and the Ba. The Ka was the soul, the Ba was the took out again the best sections to tie it together. All they left was a memory of the tree of life, the ziggurat, which again, of course, they took out the best things to confuse. But what they didn't understand was that imprint has been left in our brainstem. And once certain glands can be activated and melanin can be taken in there and the frequency is right, the memory will come back anyway. It's what they call racial memory. I remember Lemuria and all this kind of thing. Yeah.
You commented as long as we don't alter the melanin, what are the ways that people can alter, accidentally, I know we had talked about drugs and things like alcohol can cause disruption on melanin.
Well, those are the two biggest things. Anything that is not natural to the surface, that didn't grow on the surface, and it was not placed within the body in the form of amino acids that can adapt to them, is foreign to that particular person. The reason why melanin was put there is because not only can it take ultraviolet and infrasound and ultra-infrasonic light, but it can adapt to frequencies. Things that would shatter some person, melanin will make it sound at a different level. That's why a lot of people are beginning to open up the left ear. They're hearing sounds and their right ear closes. During the day, you'll hear one ear closed. You're blessed if you're having that because you're trying to adjust the frequencies. And the more you take in things of a lower vibration, the more it clogs up the pores and the bloodstream and the glands and everything else, so you can't adapt. The body's trying to adapt. This is why, again, we have that Taishan Noni. And the only reason I keep selling, because you see I sell a lot of things, is because it is still one of the best things we're learning to work on that pineal gland to help that grade of melanin. That's why, again, it's being given back freely, because the only healing you're going to get now is going to have to come from adjusting to the frequencies from within. So, again, it's like that gift or whatever it is a frequency changer. It's a frequency adapter. It is called melanin, secreted by the pineal gland, and that's why in many body types, it couldn't promulgate the pineal gland because the food that they desired, the drinks that they desired, the thoughts that they held were all counter-distinct to the pineal gland. So even though they were given one in the body, their soul was of a vibration. They ate, wanted, and desired things that would be, death to that body. The pineal gland is why it was called atrophied in many cases. It's now becoming large in some races and in some people as you take in the food of the gods. The food of the gods, of course, is essences and energies more than substances and animals.
You suggest in your own research, we have, bibliography, books that perhaps we could start out.
Yeah, I passed out a flyer. I'm very open nowadays because we don't have a lot of time. On that flyer you see, I listed them. Did you get the flyer, The World Within? If not, I think we have some extra copies. Mark, do we have any more? Yeah. Well, I listed some books there. I add another one that's not on there, and that is Journey to the Earth's Interior by Marshall Gardner. You've got 6 there, and some of those New York books, they've got 22 or 28 scrolls or more. Zachariah Sitchin, I think it's, what is it? How many books in Zachariah Sitchin, Marsh, remember? 7? There. Yeah, you even sold that thing one time for $99, a whole set. Very few people were wise enough to buy it. Everything's being revealed, and you can't afford it. Believe me, it's just a matter of your choices, how you want to spend your money.
Where's the melanin located in the body? I guess I thought you know that.
Melanin, of course, is everywhere, and it's the central peak is the pineal gland, which would be beneath the pons viroidae and just above, what is it, the worm that turns. What is that? The pituitary. It hangs by a little ganglia. So it's right in the center of the skull. It is a crystal. It acts like a crystal. It picks up frequencies. It's charged up during the daytime. This is why they used to tell you to go headless and don't wear a hat. You find people that cover their head or get those haircuts over 3 full moons, the hair starts falling out because that central spiral, they've cut across it. That's why they told you not to cut the hair and all like that. If you cut the hair, don't cut it over the occipital over the pons viroidae. But of course, now they used to use metal clippers and cut it and everything else again. The hair won't grow if you cut it 3 full moons like that because your growing cycle is only 6 months out of a year. So that gland there is the one that pulls in energy, and once it pulls in energy, it begins to release energy. It releases at night when we go to sleep. And at night, under moonlight, again, usually from about 10 o'clock to about 2:30 in the morning, on the normal frequencies, I'm not talking about daylight saving time and all this other stuff, the body releases the energy that is bad and takes in energy that is new. But this released energy is magnetic energy, which causes growth, which causes psychic ability, which causes dreams. The soul that can dream is the soul that can remember, because half of this is just simply memory that we have forgotten about. And then it rebalances by being charged up during the day with full spectrum light. That's why in many cases now they even give you eye bulbs and eye lamps for people who can't take full spectrum light from the sun. They're trying to rev up that little gland by using eye light. This is not for people that can walk bareheaded in the sunlight or who have a pineal gland, which will always seek the light. So that key is pineal gland, And from the pineal gland comes melanin. And melanin is what triggers the pituitary gland, which they have also lied or been not completely honest, whichever you want to use, by saying that the pituitary gland is your master gland. How can the pituitary gland be the master gland of the body when if the pineal gland doesn't work with it, and if the pineal gland goes, it goes in a matter of 7 years. And every 7 years, we change every cell structure in our body, which means if your pineal gland is correct, you can become a whole new person in 7 years' time, if you're honoring it. So melanin comes from the pineal gland. It operates, again, through melanocytes, at any site that can tan. In some places now, people are beginning to get vitiligo or vertigo, something like that, where they're losing the melanin capability of that cell. That happened before when the radiation field changed, and a lot of people with no melanin were born or created or had to adapt those kind of bodies and had to pay the penalty for altering that. They're trying to do the same thing again with these chemicals and with artificial sunlight. But melanin is in all cells. When melanin is in that cell, it's just like you have a big crystal in that cell. That cell is going to operate on its highest frequency. To start to operate on its highest frequency in many cases now is to cause a tumor or a growth or a swelling because the body can't take it. So it means for melanin to operate, the grade of melanin must be kept up and the body must be kept clean because it all starts first with the blood, which is full of melanin. That's what they call red corpuscles. If you notice, when red corpuscles become red, it's when they're exposed to the air. Inside the body, they're clear. That's because once they hit oxidation and the inner light, and to say I want to take this very far over the next 3 weeks because there's a lot of worlds within, as we've just hit one of, it begins to change frequency. The frequency of the blood is what will keep you safe or keep you in harm, the frequency of the blood. In general, I'm talking about not from a bullet and a gun now, or a knife, but from the so-called diseases and plagues that they're coming. Can pass you over in turn if your melanin is right and your consciousness is right. I think that's clear.
You mentioned about the different types of students. They weren't really the substances, but that they were essences and energy.
What are the gods?
What are they?
Well, you have to ask, what is a god and all like this? Let's just say that if there are frequencies in creation, and if there are vibrations in creation, then higher vibrations obviously would be for creatures or things that could withstand or enjoy that kind of vibration. The frequencies that would ensue from that vibration would also be of such that some people would like it, some people may not like it. Dogs and cats and bats and things tune to a higher frequency, but at the same time we give them dog food, so they die quickly, okay? But while they're here, they can turn to a frequency that we can't. On occasion, we may turn to it. And when we do, we think we've gone into a rapture from the drugs that will let the frequency change and vibration change. We got on a drug high, but it did not come with all the blood changing and quickening. It started because the drug altered it. So that's what I'm saying is, I believe, and you have to find your own truth, that we live in a frequency field on a planet. And whatever the frequency is on the highest part of that planet, a higher life form can live within it. Whatever the frequency is on the lowest portion of that planet or frequency, the lower life form can live on. Our planet is changing frequencies. So therefore, we don't have too much choice but to change frequencies within our own selves if we're going to stay on a planet.
Would you ever be getting the soul volume of that Subterranean thing? You said the people were purchasing them, and you said you had all nine. You had all the volumes, 7 volumes for $99.
Oh yeah, well that deal's gone. That was 2 years ago. Oh yeah. Yeah, his books now are sky high. It costs you $200 now for the set wealth tax. I just say we had it, and then of course we kept it, but a lot of people didn't take advantage of it. But now everybody's talking about Zechariah 6, where can you get it? They now charge you almost $25 for just one. And there's 7 or 8 plus it doesn't have the companion like the appendix and all for it. But again, understand one thing. He states all throughout his writings that he takes all of his things not because he's a terrific scholar, he's an excellent researcher. And he states they all come from the Sumerian texts. Read about Sumer. Understand where Sumer was, and understand what Mesopotamia 1 was and where it was. And that'll tell you a lot right there. You might even have to read all the books other than this trigger. Mesopotamia 1, because according to history, there's Mesopotamia 1, and Mesopotamia too, and the land of Sumer and the Sumerians. He is taking his from the Sumerian codexes and parchments and tablets. Even the story of Gilgamesh, which the Greeks changed to read Gilgamesh, was not the way it read, but they call it Gilgamesh. All of these things are stories of what happened seemingly in this valley, in the area there of the Tigris and Euphrates, which you can find is right there, what they call the Red Sea, right where they placed Israel, and the whole bit. But Sumer and Mesopotamia 1 is right there where they're battling now. It's right there at the Gulf. It's right there in the land of the Mideast. And right there where they have the closest access now to some of the inner world cities, the highest vibrating.
So, Mr. Rat.
Okay, I'm sorry now. I got to stop you. I think it was a Truder or was somebody who had a hand up there before. It was right behind. Okay, they put a hand down now. Okay.
Yeah, I was, and you'll notice one of the biggest, latest looks for young black males is the bald head. And, I'm wondering what that's, how that's going to affect, how that's affecting their pineal gland, their vibrational rate, etc. And a day will come when they will want here from based on what you're saying, it sounds like that they won't be able to grow any.
Nope. And if you notice now, they're even doing it to Latinos. The Latino high schools are now cutting their hair short. Some have a little ponytail in the back, and some have the top, but they're cutting and shaving their hair. And they have some of the longer strands and coarser strands of hair around, which can pull in a lot of energy. This is foolish. It's ridiculous, but it's a style and something that has come first from not lining the nappy hair, and therefore not wanting the hair to be seen. Otherwise, it was real quick to get dressed because you don't have to worry about cutting your hair. You have hair because hair is supposed to serve a purpose. Not only is it covering, but each strand of hair goes deeply into the skull. It not only just goes to the scalp, it drops into the skull. It has liquids. And you pull in energy from the moon and energy from the sun through the hair that now can adjust to frequency. When you're just exposed to it, that's why some people exposed to the direct lights of the sun become cathartic. They get sunstruck because it's too much energy with nothing to break it down. There's no inward transformer, and it automatically begins to burn out your pineal gland because there's too much energy all the time. If you notice again, to protect the enclosed soul, the baby's skull sutures. But what when a baby is all psychic and have on this side and all the other side? Oh, I'm being probably going too far with it too fast. But if you notice, the skull has little suturing. It automatically closes. There's a big hole in the center. You'll find there's a hole in most things nowadays. It's an entranceway. When the baby's skull is still open there, the baby does not have well-developed coordination, so they say. But the baby dreams, the baby can talk, the baby can communicate psychically with the mother, the whole bit. When that closes, the soul is now encased in prison, and now all the sights and all the 5 sights and 5 senses work, but they lose the psychic ability. Now you have to get it through the hair and through the pineal gland. You can't go directly enough. You're now encased in prison soul.
There are some mothers, when they have male children, you see the children, they don't cut their hair.
Right. And you shouldn't, especially at those early 10 to 7 years. That first 7 years is most important. Yeah. Right? And if you let your hair grow there, your hair will grow the whole time again until you get all the shampoos and all the, as I say, cutting across that scalp. But if you know, the hair grows in the world. Everything is a vortex. Hair grows in a circle. You cut across that circle on your magnetic month, every 28 and a half days, 27 and a half days, I think it is now. You cut to that 3 full moons, it ain't going to grow there. You have to really start raising the mental energy and concentration to make it grow. You do that another 3 months, and by again, you do that for a year, your hair won't grow anymore, period. Because you cut across the... If it doesn't take the hair out, the hair can still work because there's still hair there. When the hair falls out, there is no connection to the sebaceous gland, the sebaceous cuticle. The world spiral is energy spiraling in. The biggest thing is the anchor where it's going out of the skull. The energy is dropped into there and goes to the subterranean cuticle down into the, that energy is now carried directly, but it's still transferred. Most of it would whirl if the hair is spiral, because if it whirls down, it slows it down even more. But at least there's something there to at least there's a shaft to hold it. You see what I'm saying? When it burns out, now you're just getting radiation and everything pounding into the hair on that most delicate, this is why it's so deep in the skull, pineal gland. So the body tries to protect it, it just seals up. And nothing to grow out of it. because it's got to try to protect you from some kind of radiation. That's why it's shiny and bald and hard, and it even grows a thick mantle. That's why the hair will grow in men, because there's now a plate, a mantle that's there. So the hair can't get through it, because if the hair was getting through it, the energy, the radiation would come through and burn you.
But those people who are bald, what can they do to get benefits of hair? And since nothing will grow there, is there something that they can do to try and retrieve the benefit?
That's kind of far afield, but it's in proximity of what I just talked about. I don't know how I got on this tangent. But the hair grows with amino acids and minerals. The mineral uptake must be colloidal, so that it quickly goes into the bloodstream. No shampoos, no soaps. If you understand what shampoos are, it's all from animals, and dye and lye and caustic things that abuse even further and make the scalp tighten up even more so. Steam will begin to open up those areas again. Natural, they used to say charcoal, rubbing of charcoal. There's some other things, castor oil, and I think not aloe vera because that tightens things that would be act as emollient. But mainly it's from the inside out. Then, of course, you've got to work the energy so that the skin has actually been burned. The skin now closed up because of all the radiation that it's been exposed to. So you have to soften it up with massages, hand passes, magnets, things like this. And then you must put the amino acids and minerals back into the bloodstream so it can get up there again and try to see what can be done. If it can be grown, it'll have to be pretty much that way.
You say every 7 years the body can bring, generates itself. Is that the best way to say it? So what is the 7-year cycle? How can you find out what your 7-year cycle?
From the time of birth, natal entrance, or the time of fetal birth. Some say it when it first conceived. Some say it's at fetal birth. I don't know enough to argue about it. But then it's every 7 years. Every cell in your body has renewed itself, replaced itself, replicated itself every 7 years. So it starts with the things that are easy to replicate, like the blood, and so all the way down to the skin cells, finally, which is an organ also. The skin is an organ too. And so over 7 years, every cell in your body has had a chance to renew itself and regenerate. If you honor that, then the next 7 years is easier to deal with, until which time, as I say, when you get 7 times 7, will you reach your peak for mental and all like this, and should be able to control then through wisdom your body itself and keep what you want around you. Say,
I was asking about the Iraqi situation because that's over in the Middle East, and they seem to call it off for the time being. Is it because of the invalid what's really going on? Is that the real reason why the United States want to go over there? Because they want their stake in the inner for the...
Yeah, my feeling from a metaphysical point of view, and what little I can understand on this tragedy that is our present history, or our present, whatever you want to call it, is that nothing is ever as it seems. So, as you know, being a little bit neurotic, which I had admitted to a long time ago, I would never admit to being psychotic. There's nothing crazy about me. But I do have a fear and a questioning for some of these things that I see going on, which to me are ridiculous. They never tell you what the truth is. So you have to look at the area itself. Why do they keep going back to the same daggone area? What is it about over there that is good? Well, this gets into a whole thing like we've talked about. I know you've been to almost all my lectures, bless you. And so I know you've heard this, and I don't want to put all this on the tape, because again, they're paying for one thing and not everything. But in general, in fact, let's just do this.
On our Zelle about a week or so ago, someone had called in when they were talking about this new hole that they found. Someone had called in and said something about some scientists had been digging somewhere, and they started hearing yelling and screaming from out of this hole, and it scared them so bad that they discontinued.
Well, that gets to deal with the trolls and the D-rolls and all like this. I really decided, even though I put it on a flyer, to kind of bring this into 3 parts, because if I start this one, it's going to take a good hour to explain the rest. But there is a philosophy that there are creatures that live in there that aren't ready for the surface yet, and they definitely aren't ready to go into what they call the inner world, the highest frequency of our planet. So they exist there, and they're kind of angry about what happened in the first place, and they're under control of some of the worst scum, shall we say, in our solar system and beyond, and they do bad things to people. And usually if you're caught up there, it's because of certain things you've done and so on again like this. So they can hear these. Also, let me say, too, though, without going into any trolls or D-rolls or T-rolls or Bathats or anything else, that's what they call the Greys or Bathats people, there are actually government research areas down there, too. And they don't care what they do either, all right? One of the no-no areas around here is Dulce, New Mexico. Whatever you do, stay away from that place. Dulce, New Mexico has both the worst form of alien and the worst form of government researcher all working in amalgamation. And they're creating all kinds of things. And every once in a while, the bat boys that they make and the spider people and the alligator man, all made right down there. By the way, too, right down the street down here where they have one of the largest cyclotrons right there at the Fermi Institute, they now have the dinosaur remains, or whatever they want to call it, 90% intact, that was brought down to the Field Museum. They made that movie Relic off that. They now have it right out here. Okay? I think that was on our bell of the night then, too. It's an interesting show. He brings in that. I said, my God, now they got it. You know the first thing you're going to do. Clone it. Remake it, just like they did in 1955 with those 5 youngsters. Now we can actually get something in Lake Michigan came out of there, and the people will say, what God did this? The God human. God mad scientist that releases it. Or even if they try to keep it, like in the movies, it's going to get away. And it's the same old thing again. They're mad in a sense of, well, we'll be talking about where different races came from before this whole thing ends, too. Okay, let's go there. No, I'm sorry. There and then sure.
I didn't understand when you said that people hate different God. Because I do consult a time, but let's still have a case and then, they talk about the study, the anatomies of the body is, I guess a lie with big different anatomy God expressed in those ways. And so I guess it kind of moving towards that God is within. So I'm not quite understanding when you say that that different people have different gods.
Okay, you're talking in many cases of the, you go to the Tonga workshops and such?
Basically, I'm listening to the tape right now.
Okay. Okay. Well, there is a group there, they're out of 79th Street, I think, or wherever it is. They do believe in the ancestors and this kind of thing, and they believe in the, in the whole concept of that. What I'm speaking of is not really fair because I stopped teaching classes. I used to have classes in metaphysics, and I just don't have time for that now. But it is another philosophy that that not only do you have chakra centers by which you can come in and out of a body or raise higher consciousness, but that there were people, scientists, people who had a little bit more training, education, or wisdom than you had, that actually tried to make people and clone people and want to control certain areas of our earth because they think it's their right to do so. They are not the creator. They didn't make the cosmos. They didn't make nebulae and galaxies. They, in many cases, the ones here can't even make a planet. But they can misuse a lower life form who is unconscious and make them worship them and feel that they can now claim it. Much like you go to the vivisectionists and they were going to destroy a dog, so you take the dog and you name the dog, and that dog is now your dog. Well, you didn't birth the dog. The dog may hold allegiance to you because the dog sees you there. And you may have saved the dog from a vivisectionist. But there are other dogs, of course, that we're not going to that vivisectionist. But now you say, all the dogs here are mine. And the dogs are taught this. Well, here's a new one. This is what we worship. Well, this is what we call gods. What we refer to in metaphysics as gods. Simply very wise people, more scientific know-how than you, that because they do what they do, people worship them. And they feel that they have control. They are what we call lesser gods and all this kind of books, and that's the concept of it.
Since that I talked about God, there are something that I think on, and it's certain that are made by certain God, and what are the God I think being Jehovah, and I understand, and that these people were made in the Garden of Eden, as I'm understanding this to be, Now, you said that a lot of certain people are here from Mars. Where was this Garden of Eden? Was that, is that on Mars, or is that, I understand that certainly it's not here at biblical symbology had caught most Christian, but is that on another planet, or is that in some part of
Well, I kind of want to go there as we go the worlds within a little bit later on. But I will answer the question, such as you, the best I can, but it will not answer and satisfy as far as we can take it. That's a whole lecture within itself. When you start talking about creation, where was it, and this kind of thing. My understanding is that there was a Garden of Eden on Mars, and there's a Garden of Eden within the Earth itself. And that until melanin was given to the inhabitants of Earth, they had a very short lifespan, and high-frequency people couldn't even live on Earth because of its electrical fields. In fact, they didn't even map their electrical fields correctly, and were caught here in many cases because they showed even people with advanced knowledge can boo-boo and make goose too. Whole concept there was that once these people began to have tutelage from the people from Mars and understood that they had a remnant here, what they call there's a name, they call the abandero, the abandoned ones, that they were abandoned in the underworld, and now they would have to work themselves out, but at least by them being here, they could raise the vibrations of other humans, mankind and self, and so like this. So then they were put in a certain area ruled by Seth to be brought about to the surface at times when they were able to. They came from the back of caves, and they were finally let loose into these tropical areas because at one time, believe it or not, Mars was a tropical area. So there's slowly some things happened there, and so this was like the remnant on Earth. The Zulus taught this, but they didn't believe in the Zulus. The Dogons taught this, but they don't believe in the Dogons. So when they tell them this, they offset whatever they said, and they go by the Holy Bible, which they, of course, have lost how to interpret that book at all. It's on 7 different levels, as I understand it. So they get into Genesis, and if you even read Sitchin, talk about Genesis Revisited, which it gives you the Sumerian codex of where Genesis was. And then the Orpheus in the underworld, the wanderings of Gilgamesh, people who were on a different planet now trying to find out what happened and what happened to their remnant and where they were, looking for marker signs and leaving up constructs by which people could then find these things. And it just gets very involved. But it's very simple. The life form was a very primitive one. It now encased the soul. There was a very ancient one, but the soul now had to work its way out of the same things that they had set up. Unfortunately, the karma was you created it. Now you have to live through it too until mankind in general can come up from under what you've now created.
Well, then let me ask you a bit. So throwing the people that are on the surf down on, as you say, at the various months that are fighting with the children, the Caucasians or other ethnic groups, do you think that there's a time frame for them to secure themselves or their survival here on this planet before their frequency or vibration change and can out?
I think that not only is there a time frame, but they're telling you what that time frame is, because everything now is cloning, DNA replication, and getting off or getting under. They've got the whole hidden government out there in Iron Mountain underneath there because they know they might not be able to stay on the surface. They're telling you it's because there might be an atomic war and they get wiped out. Well, they're not deep enough down there for the radiation to not permeate the Earth, if that was all they were worried about. You're finding now, of course, all kind of scandals that are coming up. There's an old saying that those who the gods would destroy, first they make mad. What more madness can you get than Zippergate? And then how can a person who can't control his zipper now tell you to go to war and die? You see? But a person who has no consciousness will not fight that. They will say they're used to being ruled. So I say all of that. I like to give examples before I get to my punchline, and then, of course, there's no truth for you to say. So what you're finding now is that there are a people who are not wise, who are in bodies who were not supposed to be permanent bodies because they did not have adaptogens put into them. They're supposed to be in there for a season, learn it, pass on, and go on to where they're supposed to. Others were supposed to be around longer because they supposedly were wise. Once they got here, they could get double promoted, so it took a longer lifespan to do so, and they were not supposed to be going through the silliness that we're going through now. So in a sense, you have like two creations. In a sense, you have like Genesis Revisited, the Christian says, in the sense you have a misinterpretation by those who call themselves Jews and are not, to make one believe one thing. But remember, the same book that taught that is a book that they don't honor, yet they're supposed to be Jewish. They have deeper books, okay? 4 deeper books, including the Mishnah Torah, to teach them other things than what they released through the word of the Bible to the Christian people. And if you heard it again, it was supposed to be the Hebrew lesser God that taught that, if I'm not being misinterpreted. It was a Hebrew, right? Supposed to be the seed of David. Supposed to be out of either Bethlehem or what's this N word? Nazareth. Can be both places, okay? A lot of that is misinterpretation, purposely done to control people from the books and the knowledge and the wisdom they're supposed to have. And that's where you find your first thing, confusion about the Garden of Eden. It's 4004 BC in the Garden of Eden, somewhere again in the Mideast, or was it a place deep underneath the earth and prototypes placed on it, or was it on another planet that dropped them off through a spaceship, or as John Volo Melchizedek says, through the Merkaba? All of these are to confuse you, so that you cannot make adequate choices. To get that truth, you can take all of these things in, and you got to go within, and that's the only way. Well, I'm not.
Okay.
Please go. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you again. Great bless.
We mean when you said the verb, we've got.
Well, that's what we're studying now, the world within. We're going to find it's going to be far from what we think it is. We start off with this planet. We might have to go within ourselves to really get some truths.
Well, you have to go in with ancient faith if you have to go in any.
No truth to you decide what truth is. No truth, yes.
Because they talked about a hollow earth theory, and we could know it's a theory, but to me it's a reality. Because scientifically, in a lab, if you take particle in sphere and you rotate them, the earth is rotating, and it's working out, spin behind the fan, always better create a hollow center. And then just saw him, there was nothing. And yet they don't talk about it fully. You know, no matter how high we go, they never talk about that in relationship to the earth. Go any other?
Okay. Questions, Steve?
Okay, this is about the war again. I was trying to figure out what role is China, Russia, and France playing in that they are sort of against some of the things that the United States want to do. They don't have the United States doesn't have their approval to go in and do the things that the United States, I think, wants to do. That even with this new agreement, the United States wants to make it set it up where if Hussein doesn't do the things that they're going to do, they want to automatically blast him away. And I was reading the paper today that Russia, China, and France are saying, no, you cannot automatically do them. So evidently they have the pack stake in there. I know on the search it's supposed to be the fact that Hussein owes so much money to Russia, and also that the oil in years to come will be very important to at least China and Russia. But is there something else that is out there that it thought it gets?
Always. The last part's easy to answer. Always. On this planet is never as is first given. And usually it has 7 different levels of comprehension, or 7 different levels to deal with. Dance of the 7 veils. Veil and Maya pulled over 7 times here when we get it. And always, whatever they say, if you're going to start with truth, don't let that be the first thing that you would, that would be my feeling. Now, last week you weren't here. I did the weather wars. And where I went to, like in connection here, in which we talked about, as I understand it, what Russia really has. They have weather control weapon. And the only counteraction we have is, wow, I got to stop that. The only counteraction they have here is HARP. And HARP is not ready to go into action yet, whereas Russia's can do. They could wipe this place out in a minute with that. But they also know the viciousness of the leaderships here and the gods that run them, and they know that they release germ warfare. That's what Hussein said. You know, you got all this You got weather, you control this, you could your clothing, you got in touch with these underground people. I mean, he's a wise and rich man, So we want something too. So at least we'll do with the chemical and biological weapons, which we got from the United States in the first place. You see, this is so ridiculous. I mean, you're going to give a person that they gave it to them because they wanted to control them like little puppies. They gave it to them so they could use it on Iraq. They used everything, Iran. They used everything on Iran. Israel gave Iran weaponry and money so they could fight Iraq. And while they were doing all this, they controlled the oil prices. Look at how the prices just zoom up and down. They play games. But you see, they control billions of dollars worth of Iranian money in the banks here in the United States, and they won't release it to them. So Russia says, well, yes, at least we'll pay you a little bit more for this. And, of course, Asia, especially through China now, is a coming monolith, as their prophecies have said so. The Buddhists have also, when the New Age came in, that Buddha would be the one that would bring them back in. So the whole point is, they are building like mad over there. And
do with this. I found it interesting that
France was the last ones to not sign a nuclear proliferation test and said that they would pact and said they'd test whatever they wanted to. They were testing there in the Polynesians and all like this and things. This is another thing that was very interesting too. But what I'm saying is, France says, forget all of you. France understands the English-American bloc, where Britain and America work together conjunctively, because Britain feels that it runs and rules America anyway. I told you what they thought about the original Americans that came here. These people from Newgate and Marshalsea, Frizzes, and debtors and indentured servants, they're scum. So they've always sought control of this. So of course they're going to work with them, because whatever they do, they own half the United States too. Okay? Britain already does. Now, Asia is an emerging nation. It's a nation that has China, which has the world's most of the population of the world. They have now formed an agreement with Japan. Japan beats the United States in technology now. So once Japan will now feed China, you've got the new empire, because they have too many lab troops to ever fight. They have enclaves in everybody's land. If you doubt that, understand that the Vietnamese, the North Koreans, the Cambodians, the Laotians, all have had to come under this Asiatic agreement plan or be wiped out. The Asiatic bloc now wants to bring their religion and their culture to dominate the planet. And they can do it because they can't fight a land war with them. And now that they have nuclear capability, chemical capability, and are even able to make clones there, although they said they would not do it, all right, because of their religion, they stated, now you have to contend with us. So now they can trade with Iraq, Iran, anybody they want to. And what's the United States going to do about it? It will rattle the saber and stop it from happening, but only for a point. That's why now they've got to go and negotiate. And this is why now, since nothing is now coming through Congress, we have no control of this government, whatever they do. Because now it's everything by executive order. That's why they built all these concentration camps, everything else. When you finally do take a stand, you wake up, they got places for you. And that's the whole point. But last week's is what if you can, get the tape, the Weather Wars. That's why I went in all this, what they do have, how it was built, when it was, what they took Tesla, World, Keeley, Wilhelm Reich, all this, got their best development, and they're now controlling the weather. They tested out in 78 here. We had snowfall in Chicago. It says in 67. United States can't do that yet. They can. They have weather control capability. They can start earthquakes. They can start tornadoes. They can start the whole bit. But if you want a step-by-step way of doing it, the Weather Wars would, and I say the House bills, the Senate bills, everything that they use. Oh, first, yes.
When you're talking about the weather, El Nino is not part of something that Russia created. Is this something natural that the earth is not invading?
It is something that the United States and Russia, the United States started it, and Russia finished it. And you can find that from last week if you go back over the Weather Wars. And there's no such thing as El Nino. Pretty soon there'll be La Nina, Just like there was, first of all, naming hurricanes after men, then later on they start naming after females. Well, it'll be La Nina soon. Everything they're blaming on La Nina and El Nino and all this stuff. Forget that. They didn't, the red plague that they're talking about. All these things that are happening are man-made things, misusing nature, not honoring radiation, not honoring chemicals, not honoring the biological life, because the people here are not from here, and they've gone power mad. They become, they would say, crazy, if you would. And they're using anything that they can, and it's all usually negative because they have a negative emotion. They work by emotions. And okay, I'm sorry, did that?
I had two things, but the follow-up on the so-called El Nino. The last picture that I saw of this infrared photography, at first it expanded across the Pacific near the equator. Now that red line, orange line has expanded all the way across the Pacific, all the way to another landmass. It's gotten that bad. And they were saying that now was the quote unquote worst El Nino. It's clearly whatever they put out there in that ocean is out of control, because it's the whole equator is just heated up. The whole equator from the western United States all the way to Asia is heated, the radiator or whatever they did over there. The other question I have, probably can answer myself, but to follow up on what Marsha said about the hollow Earth, if I would assume that if Earth is hollow, then all the other planets are too.
If they're not, we sure have. What is the telescopic worlds in collision? We sure have a lot of them. If one is hollow, the other ones can't be solid, because the one that's hollow is going to crash into the one that's solid until they all are one way or the other. Either everybody's solid or everybody's hollow. So if this planet is hollow and we have a fixed position, supposedly, that's a lie too. They have a third planet out from the sun. We're not, but that's what they say. Then this position would drastically alter if the Earth was solid, and if the other planets were hollow, or vice versa. So everything has got to be uniform for that positioning to stay. And that's why this coming alignment, is going to mean so much, because it shows now some planets are going to take on different frequencies, and all of them are going to be opposed to Earth if they continue these orbits. What does it mean? Earth's got to change, and change quick. And that's what's happening. It's a quickening.
So if there's underground in Earth, there's got to be underground in other planets. So that does that mean that if you don't see life on the surface of the other planets, that they're living in the other planet?
That's a speculation, and based on your basic hypothesis, if
Following that,
well,
seems rational to me.
rational and logic, be careful. You might be, they'll kick you out of the government.
Oh,
Yeah. Now, again, if your basic premise is right, then obviously that's the way it must go. Yes.
Last week you invented the take form the name that identified the difference between man and...
The man lectured.
Okay, anything. Okay, help you thoughts. Or can you draw any kind of metaphysical conclusion from the fact that...
True, thank you.
From the fact that it in the most recently had Kofi Annan, however he's pronounced his last name, going over making a somewhat peace pact in terms of, I think, temporarily averting the war. And then you had the situation.
Oh, I'm sorry. But as you're leaving, folks, still got one of the best, what do you call it, pineal gland foods around. Okay, good.
A few months back, you had the selling of the agreement with Alexis. I can't think of her last name now, with the strike between UPS or whatever. Can you draw any kind of metaphysical conclusion, I guess, what I'm dealing with? Black people entering in on the scene, trying to save something from being, averting something from being more destructive.
I think you can draw whatever conclusion you want. I think that the natural conclusion is to see that black people, quote unquote, have always been peacemakers. Unfortunately, we've been caught up with, what was this guy's name? This African guy who did the first killing over there and wholesale this. No.
Bullsword.
Much before all of that. Shabaka, what's his name? Okay, anyway. In Africa, yeah, when he first got these spears and started actually to kill, used to be they would send their best out, and then they would see who could throw the furthest and not get Shaka Zulu. Okay, the Zulus hated him because the Zulus, well, I that's a whole different story. But my point is, the only people who loved to kill and didn't have some remorse about it, at least honored and took over the families once they killed, were people who were not Africans, who did not have melanin. Melanin people have learned to keep their dead in vaults and in things, rather than in the mind and in the soul. and they're always fought because they're limited to, non-melanated people, because they're limited as to what kind of frequency they can stay under. Deeper frequencies let you remember your ancestors because you're part of the ancestral cycle, but not to keep them alive and trying to look like them and all this kind of thing, because you understand that they can evolve. So I would say, and more or less than what you stated, that people who have melanin always can pull in higher vibrations, and they can adjust frequency much easier and with an even flow without, getting sick and mutating and breaking out and everything else when they do so. Because melanin, which they still, for that, cannot duplicate, cannot replicate, and cannot understand, still is an adaptogen par excellence. It adapts to anything. The point is, if it's going to destroy something that is in, by doing so, it just will not work. But if it can do so, it will let that thing mutate. And I don't want to really say the key word here, because that's a whole different class. It's making me say it. I say they, I've talked. I get to argue when I say I'm not going to let all this stuff out of one lecture and all, and I wind up doing it anyway. But the DNA, the junk DNA is recombining. And if it does, then the gods will be born through the souls of men who are on the surface of earth, and they will transform into what they're supposed to be. And that's what the real fight is about. But I'm not going to go further than that, but that'll give you enough hint. That's why there's always been arbiter or goals who are called melanin carriers, who try to always seek balance between the extremes, the middle path, as they call it. Okay, I saw her head first. I'm sorry, I just look back, see the whole field, so that's it, yes. And then, if you will, share.
The solar eclipse that they had in Colombia, they said in this